Is this forwards or backwards, team?
That's forwards. It's looking perfect.
Right way.
Beautiful. Okay, I might just start then, and then we'll just see how we go. Hello, everyone. Hello, youth parliamentarians. Welcome again. Just a few quick reminders. They are exactly the same reminders as I gave earlier. Please, parliamentarians, change your virtual background if you haven't done so already. You just saw me role model changing the background because I didn't have it ready to go. So what you just saw me do, please do the same if you haven't. Also, apologies, a few people in the previous debate asked me for the virtual background and I did not see that. So hopefully everybody has a copy of it now. If you don't, ask in the Discord and maybe tag someone that's not me from Taskforce and they should be able to help you. Please change your screen names too. Again, my example would be the Honourable Member Paleologutius. I've shortened Honourable to On. You can do that if you like. My surname won't show up otherwise. And I think we're all clear. I'm just going to flag it one more time, but if you need speakers for later, please let us know. I haven't had a chance to look at the adjournment list yet, team, so I will get back to you on that. And we'll see. I might try to drop that in some point during this debate. Cool. Hopefully that's all sitting okay. Tessa has just dropped into the chat again our welfare Zoom. So for youth parliamentarians listening, if you do feel like you need a breather, you need to check in with Talia and or Annalise, they'll be there. So everyone's always welcome to take that up. In Parliament House, a lot of the time, if somebody does feel like they just need a break, they will stand up and leave the room and go somewhere else to just get a drink of water, have a breath. So this is basically the equivalent of that. You're always welcome to take a break, always welcome to go and have a chat with them if you need it. Okay, lovely. I do, of course, want to acknowledge that I am Zooming from Boonwurrung country. I want to pay my respects to Boonwurrung elders past, present and emerging. And I invite everybody to join me in paying respects to the elders of the country that you might be occupying. If you'd like to acknowledge country in a visible way by popping the country that you're occupying into your Zoom screen name, you're welcome to do that. I want to acknowledge that we are all occupying land that always has been and always will be Aboriginal land and that sovereignty was never ceded. I also want to acknowledge any First Nations people who might be joining us today in Zoom or in our live stream. Okay, lovely. So the bill that we are sponsoring today is Wellington's lovely bill, and we will hear a little bit more about that in a moment. I do want to introduce a few people who you might not have met before. So Sarah is one of our lovely clerks. Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. Thanks, Ali. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I am a staff member from the lower house, the Legislative Assembly at Parliament. Me and my colleague Paul, who's Sergeant-at-Arms, are going to clerk most of the bills for this week. So I'll be in and out for the next few days. But it's lovely to be here and good luck and have fun. I'm going to now hand over to Tim Bull, who's there. Tim's the member for Gippsland East, and he's going to act as speaker for this debate. Thanks, Tim.
G'day, everybody. This is I'm Tim. I'm from Gunai-Kurnai country up in the far east of Victoria, which I think is the best part of the state. Just to give you a little bit of brief history on myself, when we were in government, which seems a long time ago, I spent time as the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs and Local Government. Since we've been in opposition, I'm a member of the National Party. I've served in a number of shadow ministry roles. I currently have disability, ageing and carers. I currently have Veterans Affairs and I currently have racing. But I've had a number of other portfolios, including housing, including mental health, and including fishing and boating, amongst a few others that spring to mind. My electorate up here has had it very, very tough over the last 2 years. I had 75% of my electorate burnt in the fires, the previous, not the summer just gone, but the one before. You all would have seen the footage on television, no doubt, of people getting evacuated off the beaches and the like. Well, that was my electorate. And very soon after that, with 75% of our area burnt, we were straight into the COVID pandemic. So our business and our economy up here, our business sector and our economies had a very, very tough time. But it's a pleasure to be here with you today, and congratulations to you all up front for taking part in this. It's a great experience, a great learning experience. So please relax. Please enjoy your time. One of the, I guess, the great challenges in Parliament when we have bills before the chamber is when you need to sit there and listen to hours and hours of debate. Often it's a challenge to keep focused, but you can often pick up a lot of detail, interesting thoughts, interesting ideas, and interesting points of view from other speakers who are talking. So pay attention as best you can, because when bills come into the chamber in Parliament, it's actually a great learning exercise and experience for all. We hear people talking and we think, gee, I never thought of it, never thought of that. Or I never viewed it through that lens, or saw this bill from that point of view. So you can often pick up a lot of great tips of hearing others talk. So well done on taking part. And Ellie, are we right to kick off proceedings now?
Yeah, I think we are. Sarah, will you call on the bill for us?
I sure will. So the first order of the day is increased support for Youth Homelessness Bill 2021.
And I call on the first speaker on this bill from Wellington.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Vernon. I move to introduce a bill titled Increased Support for Youth Homelessness.
And speak away.
Young Victorians are currently experiencing a crisis that is currently being ignored and looked over by the public. It is an issue that is miscommunicated and is almost a taboo-like subject. I am, of course, talking and referring to the issues of homelessness, but more importantly, youth homelessness. On any given night, at least 6,000 young people are homeless. To have no home, to have no sense of belonging is incredibly destructive to a young person's health, both physically and mentally. While cities are providing so many services, those who cannot reach the criteria are faced with hostile architecture, discriminating against those who simply just want to have a place to rest and a place to sleep, both of which are just basic human nature to want and to need. Hostile architecture, by definition, is an urban design strategy that uses elements of the built environment around it to purposely guide, or in other words, restrict behaviour. When a person is wanting a place to sleep for the night in a dry area under the bridge, they are faced with spikes, making it almost impossible just to put their head down to simply have a place to sleep for the night. It's horrible, and no one should ever have to face that, and I'm sure that many of us cannot imagine that. Mental health and homelessness unfortunately come hand in hand. The statistics are horrible. On average, a therapy appointment can cost anywhere between $50 to up to $150. This is in Gippsland alone. This makes a homeless person finding it extremely, extremely difficult to simply find affordable healthcare. The lack of services is becoming rarer in regional areas such as Gippsland, as I previously stated, with services only ever being provided in towns of a decent population size. People cannot pay for transport due to the fact that that money is put between food or a place to stay for the night. That's why the implementation of more services will be extremely important, not just for mental health, but services just as physical health, school support, housing services, and even just to have some food. For those who are homeless, to just simply being able to have a quick doctor's checkup, a few bites of food, or even just having someone to talk to, it can change their life for the better. And in years to come, they will remember those small acts of kindness. In 2019 to 2020, three of the main reasons young people aged 15 to 24 sought assistance from homelessness services were either housing crises, family and domestic violence, and inadequate or inappropriate dwelling conditions. This bill aims to target all three of homelessness: primary, meaning living on the streets; secondary, meaning couch surfing or emergency accommodation; And thirdly, tertiary homelessness, living in a boarding room. With 26% of people experiencing homelessness in Victoria aged 12 and 24, no control over how the system works, nor the criteria in which they match, safety houses are a way to help this. The lack of housing services outside of the city are really hard to witness, and the effect for no place for someone to reside in is horrible. This bill will increase the support for the need for homeless youth and was created to relieve the stress and pressure of finding shelter, services and care for young people and to raise awareness for the rising rate of youth homelessness. Thank you, Speaker.
I call on the next speaker from Overnewton.
Hello, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member not. However, Mr. Speaker, it has become very clear that the bill the government proposes is flawed right down to the bone, as these safety houses they propose are to be run by volunteers. Now, they haven't defined the volunteers in their bill, so I'll do it for them. Now, volunteers are people that choose to use their free time doing something they like or believe in without pay, and I do not see how they could reliably run these safe houses for long periods of time, as there are many other volunteer organizations working in similar fields and people have day jobs that actually pay their bills. This means that many volunteers would not be available most days due to work. Are the homeless people there just supposed to run the safety houses themselves while they wait for volunteers to arrive? This bill is just unrealistic in a way it expects volunteers to work full-time without any compensation. 1 in 4 volunteers, 28.3%, undertake volunteer work for an organization for 100 hours or more each year. It's pretty low. Working 24/7 in these safety houses would be incredibly stressful, especially because they'll be understaffed and overtired. A safe haven for youth homelessness? Yeah, maybe, if you get enough volunteers, which is unlikely at best. There are many other fields to volunteer in with less vigorous hours and compensation for said hours. With all this, I don't think it's possible to run these safety houses with volunteers, which would render much of the bill useless. As if these young people are homeless, I think they'll want more than a roof over their heads. Thank you.
Thank you. I call on the second speaker for Wellington.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Villette. The opposition has stated that volunteers would be used. In fact, the HYS, Homelessness Youth Solutions, shall use organisations that already exist and partner with them. Therefore, it doesn't really matter. Now I'll move on to my arguments. Imagine being a homeless youth. People would want the right services provided to them, wouldn't they? Homeless youth are likely to be more at risk of suicide or mental health due to family and domestic violence and other factors. These youth need the adequate support services to help them through that difficult period of their life. The HYS thus will be of great benefit to them. The HYS shall partner with Headspace to provide mental health services for homeless youth across Victoria. It shall also implement community food services, including the creation and support of more programs and not-for-profit organisations that provide community food services. This, in turn, will boost the community feel, as well as relieving homeless youth the extra stress of having to find food for themselves. There are numerous studies that show people are happier when they socially interact with those services. Furthermore, the expansion of community food services to regional and remote Victoria will be beneficial to services that are lacking in those areas. The HYS shall implement housing services, including the establishment of the Safety House Program and the expansion and partnership of launch housing for the regional areas of Victoria. The HYA shall partner with Front Yard Youth Services so that the correct expertise is used to provide services for young people who are at risk of experiencing or who are experiencing homelessness in regional areas of Victoria. This will also help communities deal with this complex problem. Thus, the implementation of support services across Victoria will flatten the number of homeless youth and provide those who are experiencing it the support they so desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. I call the second speaker for the opposition.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Morello. While the implementation of community food services for homeless youths does sound good on paper, it does not have a feasible or reliable method to achieve it. The bill stipulates that this food will be supplied entirely through donations, which is incredibly unreliable. While yes, the plan does have social media backing, the harsh reality is that there is no guarantee that average Victorians will know or unfortunately care about donating food to homeless youths. What's more, a lot of resources are going to be needed to attract donors rather than actually going to providing the food for these struggling youths. Also, what if donors donate once and then just stop? That happens a lot of the time. Goodwill donations are a difficult thing to attract and an even harder thing to keep. If donations are smaller on a particular day, then there's a good chance those youths that are under your care will go hungry. And if people see these youths still go hungry, there's a good chance that they'll believe it's useless and donate even less. Also, there's no guarantee that this food will be of quality and will fulfill a young person's nutritional requirements. The most common food donations are old canned goods like Spam, baked beans, or sugary snack foods, which are unhealthy, unappetizing, and are not going to meet the requirements laid out by the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating. For example, a single serving of Spam contains 16 grams of fat, includes 6 grams of saturated fat, 33% of the daily required amount of sodium, and a hefty amount of cholesterol. Yeah, that's not going to cut it. These young kids need fresh fruit, vegetables, proteins, grains, and dairy that they just aren't going to receive with donations alone. Overall, the bill's plan for community food services for homeless youths has not been thought through whatsoever or expanded upon in a way that would ensure that they have regular healthy meals. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable member. I call on the next speaker for Wellington, please.
Speaker, the Honourable Member O'Connell. Thousands of young people from the state of Victoria are experiencing homelessness at this very moment. That is 26% of individuals aged between 16 and 24 are experiencing some form of homelessness every day, with temperatures reaching lower than -1 degrees in this winter alone. There desperately needs to be an adoption of safety houses in all communities that young people can go to when experiencing some form of homelessness. Young people all over the state have nowhere to go during the nights where the frost sweeps over windshields and the nights in which our fingertips turn numb due to the cold. To reduce the rate of youth homelessness, it is an inevitable decision that we must adopt a way in which that young people can turn to their fellow members of community to seek shelter and safety for short periods of time, and I cannot stress that enough. This part of the bill will be directed at informing our youth and our government to ask them to create a system in which our youth can be safe, and that is the adoption of safety houses in all areas of rural and metropolitan Melbourne. There is, in fact, a lack of options for people to seek shelter in especially rural areas, which ultimately results in people living on the pavement of our streets, under the covers of our bus shelters, and on the park benches of our towns. Our youth want this, and they need this. We need more ways to stop this growing issue, to shelter our young people from the danger and storms that life brings, and safety houses is one of them. It is our responsibility and obligation to create a system that protects our youth, and our young Victorians are reliant upon this bill for their protection and safety. The issue is in our hands. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call the next speaker representing the opposition.
Speaker, Honourable Member Gavelis. I completely sympathise with the previous speaker. I truly do. However, Mr. Speaker, do you know what the median house price is in Melbourne is? I'll tell you, it's $1,022,927. Over $1 million to buy an average house. Why this price, Mr. Speaker? It's because of the scarcity of houses on the market due to cashed up Victorians and a high influx of foreign interests snapping up these properties, even during COVID. How can the government ensure quality housing and a substantial number of homes for so many youths when the demand is sadly so high? Furthermore, with COVID being consideration, we would need more homes as we cannot fit as many youths into one house due to COVID safe restrictions. We need to instead help these homeless youths by providing alternative solutions, such as potentially providing subsidies for these youths and trying to educate them on how they can get into the property market with the support of the government. Now the government might argue that housing can be found in more rural areas. However, we, the opposition, argue that not only is property getting harder and harder to find in an ever-booming rural property market, but as well, sadly, the majority of homeless youths are in Metro Melbourne. Meaning, how are we meant to cater to the majority if only the minority will be finding these safe homes in rural areas? Is the opposition willing to provide transport for these youths? If so, will the government be liable for transporting youths under the age of 18 without the consent of their guardian? I can see that the opposition has the right intentions for this bill. However, it is flawed and its issues need to be addressed. Thank you.
Are there any further speakers from the bill proponents, Wellington, on this bill?
Speaker, the Honourable Member Clay. The key to helping solve the problem of youth homelessness is to tackle every corner of the issue. That is why the destruction, ceasing, and removal of hostile architecture is so important. Homeless people have been subject to discrimination within the urban environment we inhabit, with hostile architecture being made to deter those struggling away from areas we live in and to place them in dangerous situations. It is even established in the urban design guidelines, which the government and local councils follow, that urban architecture and landscaping is made to move criminals away from spaces. But these aren't criminals. These are people with no other choice but to sleep on the street. We, as compassionate human beings, should be making the lives of those suffering easier and not pushing them into the shadows where they are exposed to more dangers. Why should someone's last resort of sleeping on a park bench be met with armrests between seats and spikes and stones protruding out? By definition, hostile architecture is made to purposely guide or restrict movement and behaviour in an area. These designs are made to hide and cover up our homeless population. So rather than help, we have been trying to disguise our streets and pretend that these issues are non-existent. Once you take your horse blinkers off, you'll notice the suffering these architectural abominations cause. And now, facing a huge crisis in our young homeless population, where are the young Australians going to turn to when they have no other choice? Do you force them to go back to their abusive household, which they've been kicked out of? Or do you make that park bench, that stone seat, a little bit more comfortable and able to sleep on before they can receive proper care? It is time to remove the cancer of hostile architecture from our streets. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there any further speakers from the opposition?
Speaker, the Honourable Member Karamoshes. Quite frankly, the sole premise of this bill has a good intention, but what about police? When discussing the needs to include the use of police, looking at this in a larger scale, this can and will evidently stretch the resources of the state police department. With the needs of having to use police checks for individuals who are interested in becoming volunteers of these housing areas, when looking at the larger picture, if there is a large number of people interested in being involved in this program, then not only will the wait time to become a volunteer increasingly grow due to the checks, but it will also place a strain onto the police in these areas with the housing, when they could in fact be needing this time to focus on more important problems in the community. With this in mind, the main focus of these housing is to ensure the safety of young people. Keeping with this idea, in order to make sure that all individuals living in these housing developments, along with the volunteers involved, do not get harmed, it would have to mean potentially looking at keeping police or properly trained security on standby to protect the housing in case any fights were to break out, or potentially preventing dangerous activity from occurring. I'm not suggesting that anybody involved are criminals, but with needing to have law enforcement watching over these areas, it can become strenuous on nearby police departments. Thank you.
Any further speakers from Wellington?
Honourable Member Carmichael. Approve more homeless housing for homeless in local council areas. One part of this could be to use current abandoned housing or buildings for housing. Benefits: reducing homelessness, social and a cost saving. Homelessness might be able to get a job, reduce unemployment benefits, and contribute to the community. People are safer off the streets. Reduce number of abandoned buildings being vandalized. Less people on streets. They can access healthcare. They can access education, receive counselling for finance and living, reduce crime and the costs of crime, such as prison, court costs, get families off streets and into safe housing, programs to help teenagers return to families or contact child services to protect them, reduce call-outs to police and ambulance, saving money. Thank you.
Well spoken. Do we have any further speakers from the opposition?
Speaker, the Honourable Member Agar. Sorry, is the timer going? I can't. Okay. It is clear that this bill disappointingly does not take a variety of immovable aspects into account. Whilst this bill is all for supporting the homeless youth, the information in relation to how they will be supported out of this position they are currently in and how care will actually take place is non-existent. It is stated that one form of advertising will be done via the radio. If we assume that the youth have a car or multiple of them, where will they safely be held? Will they be in a spot easily accessible? And what will the road conditions look like around this heavily populated area? There's also no information about what will occur if the youth were to have one or more children, other than the concerningly underestimated amount of security, social workers, and other major services needed. Adding children on top of this issue is sure to strain the operation as a whole. There's simply nothing on how the youth will be helped out of homelessness and given the support on how to keep living, such as in areas like an apartment or loft. It reads as if they are to stay in the HYS's care forever and does not consider what will occur if the people they help end up back into a state of homelessness or those who simply do not want to leave the care of the HYS. Will they be sent the funds by the HYS if they start falling behind on payments or randomly kicked out? Will mental health services be continued even when they move on from the program? And how will those refusing to leave be dealt with? What will occur when they are to turn 26 but aren't prepared to leave? Will they simply be pushed out onto the roads without care as they're no longer considered youth? It is disappointing to see the lack of development of the youth's living situations considered in this bill.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers from Wellington?
Yes. Speaker, Honourable Member St. Pierre. Young people need support, care, and the ability to grow in tough situations. The best way to provide young adults with this is to offer new initiatives that will help them get on the right track and grab their lives for the better, aiming for a better future for both them and society. To achieve this, the solution will be to offer a rebate for essential infrastructure and support services as a rural initiative. The establishment of Homeless Youth Solutions, or HYS, will be supervising and determining the rebate and financial aspects of the bill as an initiative to increase the effectiveness of the project as a whole. Not only will this be extremely helpful, but there are factors that make it even more accurate. Firstly, there will be a component which evaluates the distance from the outskirts of metropolitan Melbourne or any Victorian city, as well as the population of the Shire. This allows for representation that is fair for everyone. Fairness is important, it really is, and as a result, it is very important to consider this as well. Furthermore, it also relates to the data of people who are poor, facing challenges that exceed those from yours and I. If the refuters of this bill believe there could be an abuse of funding and of the wonderful opportunity, don't worry, because we also added a special part. There's a huge safe net. Councils will be able to claim this rebate once per financial year for a total of 6 times. This will add an advancement towards achieving not only a further step in stopping youth homelessness, but also towards the improved future.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers from the opposition?
Speaker, the Honourable Member Nicol. It is obvious to everyone that the world is very different to the one we knew 2 years ago. As this bill is being proposed in a COVID-19 climate, it raises concerns of its operation. COVID has seen an increased number in homelessness. Therefore, social distancing is almost impossible in these homes. What would it look like if there was an outbreak? Or how does even a lockdown look in these houses? I can't imagine that basic supplies will be taken care of. If the opposition was somehow able to achieve their unrealistic numbers of volunteers or workers and their hours, how would there be testing of these workers? What if these volunteers lives outside the radius of these houses? And most importantly, how can we make sure that these residents are safe as well as the volunteers? As all of us are aware, the vaccine rollout is our main source of combating this virus. Is there a current plan to vaccinate these residents? Will the opposition be able to get a supply for them? Or will volunteers be assisting residents in bookings and transporting them to site? Do they have the supply to do this and the time? Furthermore, if any of these people do not want the vaccine, are the opposition allowing them into these homes, risking the lives of others? Or are they just going to have to stay homeless until they come around on the vaccine and decide to get it? This bill just seems quite unrealistic in a COVID environment to be performed to its full capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member for Nicol. Any further speakers for Wellington? No. Do we have any further speakers for Overnewton? Honourable Member Coe.
Hello, I'm speaking for Wellington. Sorry, I put my hand up late. Speaker, the Honourable Member Coe. So the opposition have stated, they have attempted to state certain thoughts with our bill. However, they in themselves have not properly understood the bill. They have attempted to stipulate that the youth can be helped by giving them subsidies in order to afford housing. However, this would be not just a logistical nightmare, but also impractical, because if a youth is unable to afford regular rent, and food on the table, how would they be able to then afford a house that the opposition said themselves is the median price of about $1.2 million currently? Furthermore, the opposition has failed to recognize that the stipulation of our bill focuses on the collaboration with existing services for homeless youth and expanding those services to rural areas. They have tried again and again to say that we would need to drive numbers for volunteers and we need to do more police checks. However, with the current systems existing, we already have the infrastructure provided to support these homeless youths. Thank you.
Well spoken. I'm looking for hands here. Are there any further speakers for Overnewton? No. Any further speakers for Wellington? No. Last chance. Going. Okay. Sarah, do we now move to a vote on the bill?
We do. I just want to put the last call out for anyone else who wishes to contribute on the bill. If not, we'll have a right of reply. So, Tim, if you just wanted to call the sponsor for the right of reply.
Yes, I will call the sponsor for the right of reply, which we may have just had, Sarah, but I will open that again.
Speaker, the Honourable Member Vernon. I'd like to point out that the opposition has purely reworded the bill to make it seem as if the bill is incorrect or not right. Stated in our definitions, a youth person that is homeless can be anyone under the age of 25. This, of course, includes teen mums, both their children and also the parent itself. I'd also like to point out to the Honourable Member Knott that volunteer payments are accessible. I, for one, do volunteer and I get paid for it. It's still called volunteering. The educational programs also consider promoting, and we never ever listed anything about unhealthy food. I'm uncertain as to where the opposition said that, but I'm clearing that up. Wellington Shire implores for this bill to be passed to help the future of youth that are facing youth homelessness. One bill alone cannot change homelessness, as no person alive can, but this will increase the support and make Victoria a better state. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member Vernon. Now, I might call on the clerks to walk us through the voting process. Without putting you on the spot, Sarah?
No, you're not at all. So Tim is about to put the question that the bill be read a second and a third time. So this is your chance to agree or to disagree with the bill. Megan, Ali, if you're there, does everyone know how they're voting?
Yes.
Or physically, technically how they're doing it?
Sure. So it's the same team as what we did for the MPI. So the question will be read in full. Rather than voting for one and then the other, we're going to hear the whole question, whether you want to vote aye or to the contrary no, and then you will vote either with your yes Zoom reaction or your no. And we'll use that to get a sense of, are there more greens or are there more reds? Does that make sense, Sarah and Tim and everyone?
Yep. Yes.
Lovely.
That's perfect. Go for it, Tim.
Great.
So the question is that the bill now be read a first time.
A second and third, sorry.
Second and third time, sorry. All those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary, no. Just waiting on a couple more to vote. Final votes, unless you're abstaining. And I think that the ayes have it. We're not calling a division, Sarah, are we?
No, I think that's pretty conclusive.
Okay, well done. Well done to all. Ellie, are you happy for me just to make a couple of closing remarks following the debate?
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah,
Yep.
I'm not across the changes. Will we do one more vote, a formal vote to pass the youth parliament, or?
I'm just going off the script book, and that's the last one in the script book
It's the last one.
on page 5.
Great. So, what we just did is the last one.
Yep.
Great. All right. Well, that's it then. And yes, Tim, please make your concluding remarks. We would love that.
Yeah, just a bit of feedback for some of you. I just made a few notes as you were talking, and it's very, very difficult when you've only got 2 minutes to speak. It really is. But some of you produced some really good statistics to support your arguments, and that is always a very handy thing to have. If you can quote reputable statistics from third parties, that is a good thing to do. For those in the opposition who put forth some really good arguments opposing the bill, you might like to give a little bit of thought to mentioning perhaps what is a better way forward or your preferred pathway forward. Now, that's very difficult to do in 2 minutes, but even if you can allocate perhaps your last 30 seconds to what you think your alternative view is. Some of you did an exceptional job in pulling a path or providing a strong argument in opposition, but it's often good to put forth your alternate views. Always try and speak your full amount of time. So when I'm speaking in the chamber, if I've always got a couple of additional dot points to make that, if time permits, because it's hard to record your speeches to the absolute perfect second. Maybe have a dot point or two just into areas that you can go into, discuss and wade into if you've got an extra 10, 15 seconds. In Parliament, we're either talking for 15 minutes or 10 minutes. So you've often got 30 seconds or a minute towards the end of your speech. You all spoke very well. Just a couple of special mentions. The Honourable Member Morello, Honourable Member Clay, Honourable Member Nicol, you projected your voices exceptionally well and spoke very articulately. It's important when you step up to the plate in a debate that you feel like you own the space. Try not to be too tentative or looking like you're unsure of yourself. And that comes with time and that comes with experience. But when you get your 2 minutes, you own that 2 minutes and get up there and you put your arguments forward very, very strongly and make sure, or make it look like you're owning that time and you're confident in what you're saying and you truly believe you're right. It's very difficult to put forth a strong argument when you're looking very, very unsure of yourselves. Honourable Member Coe, who summed up very well, and Honourable Member Vernon, who summed up very well. It's good to your latter speakers to be able to take apart the arguments or the viewpoints of those who've spoken before you. So whether you're in government or in opposition, it's good to be well prepared and good to get up there and talk about what you want to say and put on the record. But if you're a speaker that's down the order a bit, and this is advice I'm sure you would have had from your various coaches and experiences, is allocate a little bit of time in your speeches if you're speaking late to tackle some of the issues or some of the points that have been raised by earlier speakers. And some of you later on did that very well. And that applies as to whether you're in government or opposition. But yeah, well done and great job by all. You all spoke very well. For those who went a little bit short, just have a think about having those couple of extra little points that you can have a quick glance at the clock and wade into if you look like you are about to pull up a little bit short on what you're saying. But on the whole, well done to all. Anyone got any quick questions that you might want to